In September of 1915, a Uruguayan man, Augusto Alfredo Rogan, was executed by a firing squad at the Tower of London. The men who would shoot him declared he marched bravely, refused a blindfold, and was stoic throughout the entire process. During the trial that led up to his execution, he had given no evidence to defend himself and in fact made no defense against the charges presented. Those charges were for espionage, spying, specifically on the Loch Lomond torpedo base here in Scotland. Born in Uruguay in 1881, he was the son of a German, and he also married a German woman. Most likely recruited by German intelligence either in Uruguay or in Buenos Aires, he found himself in Europe, operating out of an espionage cell in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands. This recruitment of Latin American and non-European agents was common, as they were legally allowed into countries actively at war with the German Empire. And legally enter the UK is exactly what Augusto did. His target was here at Loch Lomond, where a secret base was used to test torpedoes for the British Navy. This information would be essential to helping the German naval vessels and submarines dominate the North Sea and surrounding coastal waters of the Atlantic. Steel-armored battleships were only about a decade old at this point, but the Imperial German Navy had been in an aggressive naval arms race with Britain for years, and British supremacy was a thorn in the side of Germany's ability to project its power. Once World War I started, though, information became essential to the Germans, who had to leverage it with their smaller naval force to take on Britain's dominance. Having sailed out of Rotterdam to England, Augusto Rogan went through the standard customs and immigration process for visitors, and informed them his visit was to travel around Scotland. They granted him passage, and he immediately went to London. Posing as a Dutch farmer, he toured several agricultural supply warehouses, feigning interest in purchasing products and farming vehicles. During subsequent interviews with employees, British intelligence found that most of the workers had found him to be oddly uneducated about basic farming and agricultural principles, which most found suspicious. He then set off to Edinburgh. Upon his arrival, he registered with the local police, which would have been a standard practice during wartime and especially of a foreign national. What was uncommon, though, was that during questioning, he informed them that during a trip to Germany, he had been under surveillance for espionage. Maybe this was an attempt at tricking them into thinking he was not a German agent, that the Germans were suspicious of him, so obviously there's no way he's spying for them, right? But it really just set alarm bells off in the minds of the police, who decided to keep tabs on him. Augusto stayed only for a day or two in Edinburgh, telling his hotel manager that he intended to go up to Tarbet to fish. Prior to leaving Edinburgh, though, he sent 2 postcards to Rotterdam, which were both intercepted by British intelligence due to them going to an address known to the security services as being suspicious. They were copied and then sent on to their destination, but another strike was tallied against Augusto Alfredo Rogan's credibility, and surveillance began in earnest to his activities. On June 9th, he arrived here at Tarbet, situated along the northern shore of Loch Lomond and only a mile from Loch Lomond, and checked into the Tarbet Hotel. By the time he arrived, he was being actively investigated, though that was unknown to him. He purchased 2 maps, one of Loch Lomond, as well as a detailed map of the head of Loch Lomond. Loch Lomond was a restricted area, and fishing was not allowed due to its usage by the Royal Navy, so his cover story of being on a fishing trip here would have raised even more questions. His trip to picturesque Tarbet wouldn't last long. In less than 6 hours of his arrival, the authorities arrived at the hotel intent on arresting him, which they did. A search of his hotel room was conducted where they found a revolver, ammunition, his contact information back in Rotterdam, as well as invisible ink. Not exactly the luggage a simple farmer on a fishing trip would have. He was whisked away to London, put on trial, and sentenced to death. The Uruguayan ambassador sent an appeal for clemency, but the British officials found nothing that would prevent them from continuing on with their punishment, and so he was executed by firing squad on September 17th. So what did Augusto stoically go to his death for? Well, it was for the Royal Navy torpedo range here at the terminus of Loch Lomond. Built in 1908, the facility would spend almost 80 years in service to the Royal Navy, with tens of thousands of torpedoes being launched and recovered from the base during its operation. 12,000 were launched just in 1944, averaging around 50 a day, peaking at 62 a day. But in its infancy, self-propelled torpedoes were also in their youth. But it was known that they would undoubtedly play a large role in the upcoming conflict due to the strategic importance of the North Atlantic waterways and coasts. Constructed specifically for the purpose of testing torpedoes, the facility had tubes mounted directly to the underside of the pier and was capable of mooring ships and submarines as well for more efficient calculations. Narrow gauge rail transported the weapons from the facility to the launch position. The torpedoes would be shot down the shallow but long loch and could be tracked and analyzed by surface vessels and then swiftly recovered to be adjusted and fired again. Floating targets were used to test accuracy and precision. This complex was essential for Britain's naval dominance, which they maintained throughout the First World War. It would go on to be utilized even more aggressively during World War II, with the bulk of its testing being done during the early 1940s. The Germans would even bomb the area, though it's not known for sure if the range was the actual target or one of opportunity. Either way, they missed anything of value. By the 1980s, though, torpedoes were becoming a lot more complex. They were able to be guided, and more specifically, they were operating at much deeper depths. The shallow floor of Loch Lomond was perfect for the first 7 decades, but technology had made it more and more irrelevant, and in 1986 it closed. It would slowly decay along the shores here until it caught fire in 2007 during demolition operations, and has since been left to crumble. Attempts and plans at developing it into a resort, marina, or apartments have all crumbled as well. One thing that is ongoing, though, is scuba diving. You can go down and find some of the torpedoes that never resurfaced, resting on the bottom of the loch floor. Thanks for watching. Check out another video here. Thanks to my Patreon subscribers for helping me get here. And as always, until next time, get lost.